Another daunting issue that's facing the territory is the ongoing layoffs of both government and private sector employees. What is the strategy plan or the exit plan for the workers who are now unemployed?
You know, that unfortunately, we find ourselves in a position that the rest of the United States has found itself for the last year and a half, 2 years. Ever since the recession started at the end of 2007 and really heightened in 2008, what we've seen is a continuous drop-off in terms of employment. And even though within the last 6 months to a year, you're beginning to see an increase in employment, it's really in the United States, you're seeing an increase in private sector employment. Even within the public sector, you're still seeing decreases in employment in terms of governmental, municipalities, and also within the educational sector. Bear in mind that the majority of our economy is driven by the US. So the disposable income of someone from the United States will determine what we have as resources to be able to spend either in the private sector or revenues that is collected by the government. We had a deficit ever since, we've always had a structural deficit. By a structural deficit, what I mean is that we've never had enough general fund revenues to match our general fund expenditures. And that goes back 15 years. The only way that we were ever able to plug that hole was by the rum receipts that came in. So what ended up happening is that from 2008 until now, what we saw was our general fund revenues decreased because of taxes. Our expenses have stayed basically the same. We were able for a period of time to manage that because we had a very strategic, very planned, limited hiring program. So for every 2 people that left, we may only have brought back 1. So we made very firm decisions as to what we were going to do. And that began to at least reduce the deficit. At the same time, we covered that by saying there were certain areas that were priorities for us. Law enforcement was extremely important with respect to issues that are happening in our community. Healthcare was extremely important, and education. And those are the last areas that we would ever want to touch. And that deficit was closing. We were able to close the deficit for 2 years by borrowing. So we only filled that gap by borrowing. We couldn't do that any longer. We'd run out of resources. And then Hovensa happened. And as a result of that, one, the legislature did not agree to certain tax increases that we were looking for. And so we didn't have the revenues to cover it. So we had no choice but to begin to do the reductions that are necessary. We're now having training programs where we're trying to find entrepreneurial opportunities that ones can get loans if necessary. In the private sector itself began to see a 20% reduction a year and a half ago. They began to see limited hours, reduced work week. So the government felt it over about a year after the private sector felt it, and we're doing the same thing. We have rapid response programs. We have social programs that we've put in place. So we're trying to put the safety net programs in place to deal with it, but at the same time, we have to recognize that we're going through a structural adjustment. And as we go through this structural adjustment, we're trying to make sure that we manage our expenses and try to increase our revenues at the same time.